Hello, North Carolina, and welcome back for another incredible episode of Liberty Inc., your source for all things liberty in our great Tar Heel state. Got a special episode today with the recording of Joshua Rohrer's acceptance speech. He was given the Sunshine Award from the NC Open Government Coalition for people working towards a better, more open, more accessible, more accountable government. He was nominated by a number of members of the Libertarian Party of North Carolina. He has been one of our strongest allies and advocates. Of course, we have fought for him every step of the way, and we are just so proud that he got the award, so honored to be a part of it, and so supportive of what NC Open Government Coalition is doing here. The award is perhaps very appropriately named the Sunshine Award, so I encourage you to watch that. Then I sit down with Political and Policy Director Dee Watson just to have a brief discussion about the primaries that happened last week. Next, our featured guest, the great Lou Perez, talks about his book, That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore. It's a good book. And then we talk about what's happened to art and comedy and how much cancel culture exists and where it manifests and what we can do to push back and why libertarianism is not making a bigger splash in the arts, amongst many other things. It's a great discussion. Definitely some laughs as well. I encourage you to check it out. And then finally, as always, Dub and Groo talk sports. Unfortunately, Travis Groo has joined a biker gang, and so he will not be here this week. But we look forward to having him back next week. Our chair, Ryan, sits in, and he and Dub, aka Cat Daddy, aka William Wells, have quite the discussion. Please like and subscribe. communications@lpnc.org with comments, questions, and all your hate. I hope you enjoy. What's up, Liberty lovers of North Carolina, the United States, and worldwide, tuning in for this amazing podcast and this amazing segment. Last week was Super Tuesday, March 5th, I believe, but Primary Tuesday in North Carolina. And joining us to talk about the primaries is our Political and Policy Director, Dee Watson. How are you doing today, Miss Watson?
Fantastic. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You class the place up. You raise the average IQ of the podcast. You make it classier. It's positive. We never get enough of you. So we just had our first governor primary in 20 some years, right? 98, something like that. An interesting primary, a long runway. We had debates last summer. We had debates this summer. We had the four-party debate with Mike Morgan and Dale Folwell, who we'll talk about a little bit later on. But overall, give me your assessment of the governor primary.
I think that it was really interesting. It helped bring in a lot of media attention, and that was really positive. We have a different kind of primary because our candidates actually get along and agree with each other a lot. And it's a very respectful and positive relationship, whereas I think some of the other primaries are much more contentious. We had a lot of turnout, and it was really the event I really liked was the one with Mike Morgan and Dale Folwell, which our nominee really won that debate. Surveys make it really clear that he hand down won that debate.
Which is, I think, a very important thing to note. So you and I were chatting right before this, and Dale Folwell and Mike Morgan both did very well, actually, in absolute numbers, and yet still didn't really come close to winning their primaries. What does this tell us in terms of what we're up against when uniparty candidates can't beat their own hand-selected opponents from the same parties in a primary?
So what it tells us is that the other parties are not really representing even their own people, right? They're the decisions within those parties are being done by a hand-selected few people in the upper echelons of the party and political insiders. So Mark Robinson was like the anointed one. He got 64% of the vote. Dale Folwell did an excellent showing. He got almost 20% of the vote. It's just so hard. They're having people. So, I mean, I would view Morgan and Falwell as pretty honest politicians, actually. Our party has an excellent relationship with Dale Falwell. He's been fantastic as far as medical transparency and pricing goes, for example. He's been amazing as state treasurer. And even though he's this incredibly intelligent, capable person who's a nice guy and everybody likes him, he still can't penetrate that aristocracy. It's really like
That's
an
a good word.
oligarchy. Yeah, it's really awful. And they're having the same problems that we are. So I guess my message would be to those Liberty Republicans, those Liberty Democrats, that reform within your party is even almost impossible. That really the Libertarian Party is really the way to go.
So actually, I think you bring up an excellent point there. It's I have respect, a little bit of sort of raised eyebrow cynicism, if you will, but respect for people working for liberty within the big parties. I get it. You have a certain set of core beliefs. You really do believe in liberty, and there are certain things that I think both parties can point to in their documents that say what they theoretically stand for, that are liberty leaning, and then they inevitably fail us. So now we're going into the race. The race has begun. Well, welcome North Carolina to the 2024 hellhole of the election season. But I say that jokingly. I am personally cautiously optimistic about some of these races. What do we need to do to get through to those Liberty Republicans and Democrats, or just those who are sick of the two-party duopoly?
I think actually we need to be patient. I know that sounds strange because we tend to think like, oh, we need to be more aggressive. We need to be ready to receive them when they realize it's just hopeless. I used to be a Republican and I came to the libertarian movement and the liberty movement when I realized that the Republicans just keep spending more money. Um, it, I mean, the Democrats didn't care about your civil liberties in reality. A few of them did, but a lot of Democrats failed on civil liberties and a lot of Republicans failed on fiscal responsibility. And the libertarians were the only ones that really cared about those things. And I think a lot of people are going into the Republican Party because they really strongly believe in fiscal responsibility, or the Democratic Party because they believe in civil liberties. And when we're just consistent, eventually they just come to us and we welcome them. And I think just communication and being open to them, because in reality, there are very few Republicans who have, I mean, I like acknowledge there are some people who have broken through in the Republican Party who are libertarian, but very few. But the libertarians are always going to be here and we're never going to go away because we are a tenacious bunch.
Yeah, we don't accept defeat very well.
No.
All right, so I want to chat a little bit more about the governor race in a minute, but we have two other primaries to discuss too. You wanna give the viewers some detail on those two?
So one of them wasn't a primary. There are actually final elections in March, and it was a local candidate, and she did pretty well. She had a really good showing. She
School
did
board,
not
right?
win. It was school board in
Yeah, okay.
Avery County. Her name's Ivy, and she did really well. And I guess that is really what our strategy is. So I know all this stuff's exciting, the governor's race and this and that, but those races, sometimes we win them, sometimes we come close. In her case, she had an excellent showing. And as a percentage of what she needed to win, she's going to do much better than these candidates. And we do win those races sometimes or come very close. So I just would like to remind people to focus locally, because that's where we really have to start. And libertarians can make huge changes locally. Um, I know of one who convinced his town council to defund their police department, not because he was against the police department, just because they all realized it was a waste of money, because they're a really small town and the county covers them and they don't need it. And the town ends up saving $100,000 a year, which is a lot of money for them. It's a small town. So these things can happen and you can have this kind of impact and change.
So I cannot reiterate that strongly enough. Run for office. Just run for office. We call them messaging candidates, and I don't think that's a fully fair summation of the value in running for office. Even if you don't want to be a candidate, almost no one wins their first race, and that's not a libertarian thing. That's everywhere. Unless you're a curated pick going for a higher office like Robinson and Stein, but even they lost to early lower offices. And that's just how it goes, because you learn things. And if you run and you lose, but you learn things, you can choose to run again, build some name recognition, or you can help manage someone else's campaign or just contribute to the party a little bit with the knowledge. And honestly, it's kind of fun. You get invited to some weird things and you get to answer surveys and you meet some people you thought you would have met, and you get a view into this whole system that we're pushing back against, and you realize that it's less, I think, by design than we realize, and more just the natural evolution of people following their incentive structures, which is a little bit of a different calculus to break. Not that there aren't people out there very much pulling strings and doing shady things, but most of your local candidates they at least got into it with good intentions.
Yeah, so these messaging races that we aren't going to win, I acknowledge that, or we're incredibly unlikely to win. They're still important. This recently came up at a local meetup where somebody came in and they're like, why are you running races when you know like this guy's going to lose? That makes no sense to me. And I said, well, first of all, for the filing fees, $140, he's going to get between $50,000 to $100,000 worth of press, like in publicity and advertisement for that. We at one point we tried media, like paid media, and Wake County spent about $9,000 on ads. And I'll tell you, every single one of these candidates is going to get a lot more out of this than that. Okay, so you're talking about a huge bang for your buck in recognition and advertising. If you have a candidate who's willing to do surveys, he's already been covered in his local paper. So they've already written articles about him and another person there. So you can't buy that. If you were going to try to buy something like that, it would cost thousands of dollars,
Yeah.
something equivalent. And it doesn't look as good because it looks like an ad instead of, this is awesome. So that's the first thing. The second thing is a lot of the people who run form a relationship with the person who does end up winning, and they end up getting accessibility. This happened to me in one of my races where now I've got the cell number of the person who did win the office, and she'll chat with me because she's actually a decent person. So you really can get a lot of access. The other thing is you can also sway the discussion that is covered in media towards libertarian principles from the people who are winning and get them on the record. And that's also huge. So all of these are actually really important, huge things. And all of our candidates have been doing it. The other thing is we've changed our strategy. If you look at the candidates we're running a much broader base of candidates this year. When I started 2 years ago, it felt like candidates were run by Wake County, like it was the Wake County Libertarian Party of North Carolina. That's not the case anymore. And this is the first year where we're running candidates in two-way races that are red instead of blue, because so Wake County has four two-way races, but those are all blue. Now we have them in red places where I think the liberty message will potentially be better received. And we wouldn't have been able to do that if we didn't have these broad candidates who are going for messaging races, but some of them got lucky and they ended up in two-way races.
Yep.
And they might just win. So these are huge changes for the party, and you can't do that unless you are running all these candidates, some of who are going to end up in, these impossible races.
And that's fine too. one other primary, Christina and Angel. What were we looking at there?
So we were hoping for more turnout. They were just fabulous. They ran together. They get along really well. I'm happy that Christina ran and won. But what we're learning is it probably wasn't worth it to run this kind of thing, and we're just trying to evaluate how to best do things. We have a good team and we're all working together, and I'm wondering if I mean, so there's two things, right? One thing could be like we're not getting the turnout in primaries because people aren't used to us running primaries, so we should probably try it one more time and see if that's the case. The other thing is, though, in reality, libertarians actually like each other and they get along really well, and we just can't, it's just not in our nature to be as contentious with each other.
It's hard for people to see that because we like arguing more than anything. But that's like what we do. That's why we all hang out together, because we're fine arguing about stuff just constantly, and other people get very tired of it.
Uh, I guess that's true. So there's one member of the party, I won't name him, but I remember like I spent 3 hours with us, and like literally we were in a barn, like cleaning the barn, and we were basically screaming at each other for 2 hours. And then I said something and then about a bunch of stuff where we just totally disagree. And then after that, we started talking about stuff we agreed on everything, and then went and worked together. Like, so I don't think a lot of people have that dynamic, where you're literally fighting, but then you set that aside and just work together. And we do that all the time. You're right, we like arguing. But that's not the same as fighting. Arguing and fighting are kind of different
Yeah, they're
things.
very different.
Yeah.
It's Noah had that one comic in the Tar Heel Libertarian last year where it was like libertarians together and they're just screaming at each other. And then somebody walks in and is like, thank God for the Fed. And then they all start screaming at them.
Yeah, it's exactly like that, yeah. It's kind of like only your brother can pick on you, like, but he won't let anybody else pick on you. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Okay, last question for you. So while we are certainly focused on local, the background is always influential. And the background this time is what's going to be one of the stupidest and most contentious federal races of all time. Because they're both paper, I mean, not paper candidates, but paper candidates in that there's no substance to either of them. We have a geriatric psychopath and a geriatric psychopath with Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
So people are going to fill in the gaps. And then to boot, we have a reflection of that race at the governor's level in North Carolina from the two big parties, and that Mark Robinson is, Mr. MAGA, and Josh Stein loves Joe Biden. Maybe not the dementia, but slightly lower IQ. Um, so what does that do in your calculations as we start gearing up for the race? What does the summer and fall look like to you?
Unfortunately, the libertarians aren't going to know who their nominee is until May, but to me, we'll run in those races. They're excellent messaging races. They'll pull people into the party, and actually, my goal for that is to try to get people active and keep them active. We have a huge upsurge every presidential election in activity, and this year we need to keep them active because our big year is not going to be 2024. It's going to be November 2025. And that's confusing to people, but we actually need to get those people active, get them thinking about it, and get them realizing that we can make a difference locally and utilizing that from the momentum that we get coming out of the presidential activity. That's the key to our success if we can do that. Does that make sense?
I love it. I love it. You heard it, folks. We need you to get active now. We do have some races where there are opportunities to win, but we are not swinging for the fences this time. We're just getting people on base, and then we field the full team to run with the baseball analogy, and that sets us up for big success in 2025. And the woman behind it, the mastermind and the engine, someone who does so much. And I just want to say publicly how much we appreciate you, Dee. Thank you for everything. Thank you for being on. I'm going to get you coming back as much as I can to talk about the state of things at the General Assembly, North Carolina politics, and the Libertarian Party's political positioning. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Everyone, stay tuned for whatever segment is next, probably the great Lou Perez. Take it easy. Hey, what's up, North Carolina? Welcome back. I'm stoked. Here we are. You're still with me. It is season 4 of your source for all things Liberty in our great Tar Heel state, Liberty Inc. And today I have with me, truly, I am fanboying a little bit, one of my favorite entertainers out there. I had looked into his bio, obviously, and then today he did me the favor of asking Gemini for his resume. And so I'm going to read what Gemini thinks of the great Lou Perez, a multifaceted comedian, writer, producer, and actor who wears many hats in the world of entertainment. Head writer and producer of the Webby Award-winning We the Internet TV channel, author of the book That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore on the death and rebirth of comedy, which we'll be talking about today. I reviewed it in last month's, Tar Heel Libertarian. Sketch comedy, the comedy duo Greg and Lou, and apparently the Wolverine's Claws Suck garnered over 20 million views online. Though I will say my favorite one is actually the Die Hard parody, which I laugh at the end a lot. Stand-up comedian, comedy writing, written for The Buzzer, produced pilots for other networks, host Lou Perez podcast, the debate series The Wrong Take. You teach writing, was a member of the venerable Upright Citizens Brigade, which is, I mean, that was like college for me. And just a ton of other stuff. And then it's at the very end, has appeared on shows like Gutfeld, which Mr. Lou Perez, thank you so much for coming on here. How you doing?
Good. I feel like I need to correct the record on Gemini. I don't teach that class anymore, you know. So they're living in the past, man. They're living with the old Lou Perez.
Well, maybe if we ask a picture of you teaching it, there'll be like a black Lou Perez with like a Chinese mom or something, and then
I've been trying to get that. I've been checking in every now and then, just trying to make that happen. And they keep saying like they're not equipped for it. So I don't know if there's some massive restructuring happening or some recoding.
the backlash was certainly there. And that's
Yeah.
that's actually what I wanted to chat with you about first. So your whole book, That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore, and the death and rebirth of comedy, which you absolutely cover, but also very autobiographical, um, very well written. Again, I highly recommend this book. You tie in the cultural developments, sort of the current zeitgeist, if you will, with your journey through comedy, which I think is just worth mentioning. So the closest I can reference is like if people ask what I do, I'm a writer. And it takes a lot of work to be a writer. Like no one's a good writer. Maybe Dostoevsky and Shakespeare, and that's like it. And everyone else, like you work really hard to be an effective writer. And there's a lot of writers. There's not a lot of comedians. I cannot imagine the amount of work that must have gone into it and how many shows you probably bombed. Every comedian, when you're watching the after takes, like they're talking about shows where they bombed and the crowd is doing nothing. So it's got to steel you against some of this backlash to the comedy. I mean,
Yeah, I think so. I when I wrote the book, it was sort of an opportunity to look back on like 20 years of doing comedy in some form or another. And it's like, wow, those 20 years really snuck up on snuck up on me. You sort of you're grinding and working on this stuff for so long. And you turn around and like, man, you got 2 decades behind you. And yeah, I think, I think for most comedians, you want people laughing, you want to be entertaining them. If they're not laughing, you want if you want like an awkward moment or something, you want to be in control of what's happening, you know? There's a lot of comedians out there. Well, I don't necessarily a lot, but there are people who are like anti-comedians who like go and do weird stuff and instead of like necessarily getting laughs, they want to get the awkwardness and stuff like that out.
are you reading like more like an Andy Kaufman or like a Hannah Goldsby?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, two of them are very, yeah, are interesting, interesting cases. But I think for the most part, it's about affecting someone in the moment, And uh, so yeah, I mean, if your goal is to make people laugh, and you're trying your darndest and they're not laughing, it could be a tough thing for someone to get over. And you know, in my book, I talk about a few moments that I had of bombing that, you know, obviously they've stuck with me. And you know, I don't know, thank God they stuck with me, or I thank God I kept notes about them, you know, just reminding myself of just how painful the experience was. And, you know, but even with that, it's like, okay, well, people reading it, my hope is that they can enjoy that pain that I
But
experienced. You know?
I mean, you said like, so that's cool, but I'm curious, like when you say it sticks with you, can you look back and laugh at it now?
Yeah, I can. There's enough there's something that happens. I don't know if it's just with me, but if enough time passes, I start to I, I have a little bit of what do they call, like a disassociation from that person, where I can kind of look at things more of like uh from like a third person, like, oh, look what's happened. You remember what happened to that guy? Like, man, that was really terrible what happened to that guy. You know, so maybe it's a way to you know, separating myself from uh the painful reality that I went through.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So something you certainly address, and it's kind of the core like background noise, I guess, of your book, is the creep of identity politics into comedy. And you really explore the philosophical debate of like, what is comedy for? Is it to speak truth to power? Is it okay to punch down? I thought it was to make people laugh. I mean, and like you said, maybe there's another point when you're up there if you want to be an offensive asshole, like, and I don't mean offensive funny, but like you said, like an Andy Kaufman, like you're playing a joke on the crowd. Um, but I guess my question is, how much of this do you think is sort of culture creeping in this because we see a lot of this leftist movement in the media, the legacy media, some of it bubbles up on social, depending on where you are. Well, I guess first my question, how much of it is real? And in the context of you and I had talked about a potential different opening, and then I just read that this Capitol Hill comedy bar in Seattle just banned Dave Smith, Louis Gomez, Jim Florentine, and Kurt Metzger for not aligning with their values.
Yeah, I saw that Kurt Metzger posted, I think the email, or at least part of the email from the booker of this comedy club. And something that Kurt Metzger pointed out was, he's like, you know, this booker's talking about the values of this community, you know, and he's like, isn't this the same place where they made that autonomous zone called Chaz, you know, where I don't know how many people were killed there and
Yeah,
whatnot. So I mean, there's, you know, there's comedy there, and I think Kurt Metzger is just such he's such a smart, hilarious comedian. He he does uh he does like a dumb voice really well,
yeah.
but he's so insightful. And whether it's his stand up or his podcast or the stuff that he does with Kyle Dunning, I think he's just brilliant. Um and but when Kurt shared this, you know, my first response was, we're still doing this.
Okay.
This is still going on. Like, comedians are getting canceled, you know, from from venues, which I think points to the shift that's happened. You know, so it's I think
The
we're in a
pendulum
much more
swings.
positive place now, where it's like, oh wow, that seems like a throwback, you know, to like a few, a few years back. So I it was yeah, I'll finish this thought, and then I'll tell you about something that I went through. Um, you know, and it doesn't speak very well, I think, of the comedy booker. I think, you know, she's, you know, kind of, you know, hurt herself, and, in a number of ways, because when you book people, you should know who they are. And the four guys that you talked about, you know, Dave Smith, Metzger, uh, Jim Florentine, and uh,
Lou
who
Gomez.
yeah, Lou. I mean, you know, Louis J. Gomez. Like, these are really successful comedians
Yeah.
with huge audiences. Um, you know, so, you know, I don't wish ill upon, you know, upon that booker or that, you know, that comedy club, but I don't see how that type of mentality will lead to business success. And uh, you know, Louis J. Gomez, you know, to his credit, in one of his tweets, he pointed out, he's like, you know, let's stop beating up basically on this club and this booker. Is like, we were able to find a new venue. We're going to be
I'm sure
fine.
pretty easily. Yeah.
Yeah, very, you know, very easily. We're going to be fine. And it was a very professional, you know, response from him. And and also it's true. I mean, they're going to be fine. They built, like, you know, Legion of Skanks and Skankfest and all that. Like, they built this up, this whole, you know, uh, this whole network that they have of comedians and podcasters and all that. And they're able to do it because people want it, you know, because
Oh
people
yeah.
really enjoy their stuff. And from my point of view, rightfully so. I think they're, you know, really talented. Yeah, and it made me think, like, I was thinking, like, you know, 'cause people ask, like, oh, were you ever canceled or whatnot? And a few years back, it was in 20, I think, yeah, it was 2020. I was with We the Internet TV, and we were promoting a short documentary I made called 5 Reasons Why We Need Sweden's Democratic Socialism. So
Okay.
pretty long title.
I'll make a note to check it out. I
Yeah.
haven't seen that one.
um you were in that one? What do you mean?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Oh, you haven't seen that one. Okay. I'm sorry. I thought, I was like, what? We interviewed
That'd
you
be
were in
pretty
it?
cool.
Whoa, I didn't. Um, and it was a cool, like, little, like a mini tour where I presented I did some stand up, I presented the documentary, and then I did a panel. And that's when I first worked with Michael Malice. Malice
Oh, nice.
was on a number of dates there. And in each city that we stopped in, Malice was, like, you know, the main person, and then we found, like, a local person to you know, join the panel. And in, I believe it was Dallas, we were supposed to do a show at, like, a kind of like an improv venue, probably like a black box theater or something like that. And it was like the night before, and they canceled, you know. So we had, like, people flying in to Dallas, and once they landed, they checked their phones, and it's like, uh, you know, this venue is canceling. And one of the reasons why is because they said that their their staff didn't feel safe with the types of material that We the Internet TV had made, you know. And which is always just, you know, I mean, just hearing that,
Ridiculous.
yeah, it's like, I don't have a record, you know. I don't, you know,
Well,
I
you're Latinx, right?
that's right. Latinx men, you never know what you're gonna get with this guy. And at the time, like, no, we didn't make a stink about it. We, you know, ended up finding a different venue, which was man, what was it? Was it Zanies or something like that in Dallas? My apologies if you're not remembering the club. You know, we found another venue, and you know, but it sucked. I mean, there were definitely people who, you know, probably didn't make the show because venues had changed, and there was a lot of uh, you know, a lot of chaos, you know, leading up to it. And it was sort of like, oh man, yeah, that happened, but I wouldn't imagine that happening today, you know. So.
So the backlash, I think you're spot on, certainly came in strong. I think Chappelle probably kicked it off from comedy because he just came out and had two middle fingers for anyone that said you can't do that joke. But it's popping up in a lot of places. So actually, I saw Anthony Jeselnik on Saturday, and he's probably the most offensive comic I've ever heard. Now, he's a pretty big lefty personally, but even he's coming out and he's like, they tell me I can't make these jokes. And then he did a thing at the end. He's like, comedians don't get canceled. Like, we're supposed to be the badasses of the entertainment world. I was like, that's kind of interesting. And I think that's easy for Anthony Jeselnik to say or Dave Chappelle to say, but where I imagined it hurts is like downstream people coming up, just starting their careers, like afraid to do certain jokes.
Oh yeah, you know, that's another thing in the same way it's like, oh man, like clubs are, clubs are canceling gigs now because of, stuff like this. To hear comedians say like, oh, cancel culture isn't real. It's like, where have you been? There's like tons and tons of examples of cancel culture, and it filters out beyond just from comedians itself to to regular people. The amount of people that I've had uh you know back in the day say to me, hey man, I love your stuff, but I can't like it or share it because I don't want to risk, like, at worst losing my job, or at best making things awkward for me and for the coworkers that I'm around. Like that chilling effect, I think, says quite a bit. And I took part in a debate with Michael Ian Black from the state and Wet Hot American Summer, and he's written a bunch of books. And uh, we debated, is wokeness killing comedy? And this was like some months back. I had a really good time, debating him. I left really liking him. And I was arguing the position, yes, wokeness is killing comedy, and he was arguing, no, it's not. It's not killing comedy. Um, and one of the subjects that came up was, obviously Shane Gillis. And at the time, uh, you know, uh, it had been, I guess, a few years since he was, fired from SNL, and I, reminded people, of what it was like at the time, where, the guy was fired before even one day, I think, on the job, and people were like, "Oh, he'll be fine," and it's like, well, he ended up being fine because he's, incredibly talented, and he makes great stuff, but at the time there was no guarantee that he would be
Yeah.
fine. There was no
And
guarantee that this
he
otherwise
wasn't a big
unknown,
star then either. I mean, he
yeah,
was popular, but he wasn't.
this otherwise unknown, relatively unknown comedian. Ah, he'll be fine. So I think, a lot of people are pretty they view the lives of other human beings as, with some great frivolity. Is, if that works,
Good
that
way to
works
put it.
for it. And then, to hear that he was going to host, SNL, it was sort of like, man, that's like the subtitle of my book. Here we go. The Birth of Comedy.
Did you
Yeah.
watch it? I haven't watched it yet.
I haven't watched it now.
I'll watch his monologue. I'm not SNL. It's hard to. I came up in the like Chris Farley, David Spade. It's hard to stomach now, and it's cliche to say, but fine. Um, it is interesting to hear people. So I do think that the like finger pointing, pro clutching, cancel culture is exaggerated because that's the nature of what people do. But to say that it hasn't happened, and some of the examples that come to mind, like Daniel Tosh or Tony Hinchcliffe, but they are going to be fine. They're mega stars. They have nothing to worry about. And again, it's like you said, Shane Gillis very easily, it could have gone a different direction.
Yeah.
If there's some sort of backlash to that, and then he's not getting gigs at other places, and all of a sudden, like, that's your livelihood. And that goes back to like what we were saying at the beginning, like it takes a lot of work. Like I know people who are trying to be stand-up comedians, and they're at an open mic 5 nights a week. They're writing jokes constantly. They're trying jokes constantly. They want them to fail because they want to see what's not funny so they can revise their jokes. Like it's more work than other jobs. Um,
And money. Yeah. And spending money and time, and it's a big commitment. It it's one of those things where, with stand up in particular, like, you have to do it. I mean, at night, that's when you have the gigs. That's when the open mics are. That's when the shows are. So a big part of whatever social life you have is going to be, centered around when you can, get to a spot, to do a few minutes.
so you make an interesting point there, and something change the subject a little bit because you are prolific. Um, what is it, louperez.com or thelouperez.com? I just had it up on my computer.
Oh, thelouperez.com.
Okay. So good. Check out his website, see all this stuff. You're into like 300 different things. Where do you find the time to write a book?
Yeah. Oh, so I guess I was lucky that I had been fired in October of 2020. So I was fired in October in 2020. I ended up writing an article that went in that ran in the Wall Street Journal, December 31st, 2020, called "How I Became a quote far right radical." And in the book, I go into the story about that. It was basically, to sum it up, there was like an academic paper that said the channel I produced
Oh
for the
yeah, yeah, you wrote
five
about that.
years,
Yeah.
yeah, the channel I produced for the past 5 years was a far right, you know, politically, and I was like, this is not a good look because I just lost that gig, and I don't know who the hell wants to work with a comedian who's quote unquote far right. So I wrote a response to that, and then that led to the book deal that I had. So I was fortunate, I guess, that I was able to devote the amount of time that I needed to write the book because I didn't have a steady job. Um, but I was also writing that book while my wife was pregnant with our second baby, and while we
Living
were
at your in-laws, right? Because
living, yeah, living with our in-laws, because the house that we had bought after trying to sell property in Brooklyn, the house that we bought, we were like doing like a full gut renovation. So, you know, pregnant, we already had a baby, living with the in-laws, unemployed, far right radical, renovating. And I had a buddy of mine who said, "Hey Lou, man, I just want you to know that everything you're going through, I went through, but not at the same time." So
yeah, thanks.
yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, again, it's an example of me sort of looking back on that guy, and I'm like, well, I don't know how he got out of it, but I'm
That's
happy
fair.
he did. So
What's it like? So, I mean, I've written a lot. I'm working on and written bad books, but autobiographical, that's different. What's that like?
um I think it's easier.
Oh,
Um
okay.
I find I remember uh but my English teacher in high school, Mr. DeMarco, I remember him bringing up that it was easier to write in the first person than the third person.
That's fair.
And at the time, like I was just like, I don't know if I was just like negative or just contradictory, but like everything he said, I just wanted to be like disagree with, or but no, it's not.
Well, you are a libertarian, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
it's not easier. It turns out Mr. DeMarco, 30 years later, you're right. It is much easier to write in the first person. Um, so yeah, I think there were a number of stories that this sort of gave me an opportunity to tell, and stuff that I found while I was writing it. I wondering, I'm sure you have this experience too, where you're focused on writing something, and then just stuff starts creeping in. You're like, oh, where did that come from? It's like you start digging up digging up old stuff that is new in a way, because you're like, oh, here, I
it
get to work on this. Yeah.
it is. I mean, like being like you said, like being a different person. Because I mean, you're going back. You're talking about like high school and your dad growing up, and then college and experiences there, and you're not that person. There's a whole lens you can look through. Like I have the experience of life to reflect on that now, and it comes through in the book. And it actually, I think, it made your telling some of your old stories funnier. So you mentioned that one club that you had to sneak through in New York.
Oh yeah. Yes.
I did the same thing to get into the tunnel. Like I went through the gay side because it was way cheaper and they didn't card.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Did you
it was
spend
a
time?
lot.
Did you spend time in New York?
I mean, I had friends that went to the School of Visual Arts, so
Okay.
we went and visited. But yeah, there was just a DJ I like spinning in the tunnel next door, so we snuck through the.
And that was a time too where you're like, I like this DJ. I want to go see this DJ, Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But it was I mean, so I tend to be critical of writers, like, and you drew me in. It was I was feeling the response, like it was emotionally resonant, I guess. And it was also laugh out loud funny. Like your descriptors and some of the things you're dealing with. And you do talk about the pregnancy and living in your in-laws and the renovations. And so you're creating this atmosphere of writing the book for the reader as you're going through. I was impressed.
Thanks, man. I
Um,
really appreciate that.
I read it right on the tail of, have you read or seen Kat Timpf's latest book?
I know that she had a book. It came out a little, I think, like
8 months ago, something like that,
yeah,
10 months
yeah,
ago.
yeah, a little after mine. But I haven't read her book.
So similar sort of concept, but she really dives into like comedy as an antidepressant almost, like using comedy to get through tragedy and how dark can you get.
Mm.
And I find the comedian mind fascinating because you're always thinking differently. Like everything you're looking at, no matter how bad it is, there's a part of you that's got to be like, is that funny? Um,
Yeah, when I get together with my longtime friend Greg and comedy partner, who we've been doing comedy together since college, uh, it's really hard to just have like quote unquote normal conversation where we're constantly speaking in bits, like, oh, this could, oh, what about this, or what about this, and we're doing callbacks to sketches that we wrote 20 years ago that maybe nobody's ever seen, but
had
um
fun doing it.
yeah, yeah, and we can get locked in on like a voice or just like a character and just do that character over and over again while we're together, which it would not be entertaining to
Yeah, I
anybody.
was gonna say your wives must hate that.
Oh, it would be terrible. Yeah, well, he's yeah, it would be an awful experience.
So you get through the book, you publish the book. Books seems to be doing fairly well. You're back on everything. You're all over the place. You were just on Fox like 2 weeks ago, I think, right? On
Yeah,
didn't you say something like
on the 9th, February 9th.
um I guess the question that I am interested in, and I put this in discussing before, you're a libertarian, you're in the arts, you're in comedy. Why do you think there aren't more libertarians in the arts? I would think that freedom of expression would just attract a libertarian mindset. And I will caveat it with like, I understand the artistic impulse for like justice and fairness and sort of rebel against the man that can land in different places, but it wouldn't be authoritarian to me. Like I don't think of um Dolly as authoritarian. He's just painting what he sees, and I just
Well, he is dependent on who's in power, I guess.
that's
He
fair.
his
Well, he'd
relationship.
be Latinx now, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it would be wild though if you had like Salvador Dali and he's like all into surrealism and shit, but the one thing he won't go to the Latinx route. Like, what are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. Come on, I'm a surrealist. What are you doing here? Yeah,
It's too surreal for him.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. I don't know the reason why there aren't more, artists, or an overabundance of artists, who are libertarians. I'm sure like Jeremy Kaufman might have like a better idea about that, like some and um, if there's like a psychological component to it. Um, but I don't know. It's something where, I found, libertarianism like when I was probably, I don't know, 25, I started, I wasn't like I wasn't the precocious kid who found Ayn Rand early on. Um, and I wonder how she felt about that. Like, man, all these libertarians are finding
'Cause she didn't
libertarianism.
even like libertarians, right? She
Yeah,
was
she was an
pretty,
objectivist.
yeah.
Yeah, what the fuck?
We irritated her.
Yeah, I bet. Um, so yeah, I mean, I don't know. Do you have thoughts on it? I'm interested. What do you think?
I do think that we get tied to being quote unquote right wing
Hmm.
like too much. I think that the people that I know coming up in the arts community. And I really did. Like, I was always, friends with the drama kids and the writing clubs and like my friends, like I said, School of Visual Arts. I have no visual art capabilities whatsoever, but same thing, it would always intrigue me. And I think that I've been a libertarian really since high school. I think I'm a couple years older than you. I'm 43. I think you
just turned 42 yesterday.
Yeah. Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you.
So I went to a Catholic high school, and it was the whole gay marriage thing that got to me. And it wasn't that I was like some big gay marriage rights activist. I was just like, how can the government tell two people like who can stand at someone's bedside in a hospital? Like, that seems crazy to me. And then the 98 elections and watching Ron Paul, and I was like, oh, where has this been my whole life?
Mhm.
And it's been from there. But when I would promote sort of these anti-state, small to no government ideals, people are like, oh, you're just a Republican. And like, no, not at all, actually. Like, they think I'm one of you all.
Mhm.
But I don't know. I don't know if it's that getting tied in. I don't know if it's the appeal of the welfare state to artists, because it is really, really tough to make it.
Mhm.
And I mean, that iron sharpens iron, as they say, but like, what was it? And then Jeselnik had an interesting comment. He was celebrating 20 years of doing comedy. And he said, but I don't consider myself having done 20 years of comedy. I consider it like 18 years, because that's when I last didn't have a roommate.
Mhm.
It was an interesting thought to me. Again, like, so you started making it. It's one thing to say you're a comedian. It's another thing one to actually be a successful.
Yeah, or being able to do it as a career, where you're actually like, paying bills. It's like, oh wow, it literally paying, this is literally paying off. Um, yeah, I mean, with the arts, I think, um, maybe there's something with the libertarians in general where the the logical mind, starts weighing like cost benefits, and it's like, uh, the say doing, stand-up comedy in particular, like this doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
Like this doesn't this doesn't jive well. Um, and maybe there's, other components to that where it's like, uh, uh, the skills that, that go along with that, might not necessarily be about, they might be like taking chances on like, here's a crypto, or here's like, uh, taking, chances in an entrepreneurial, way, as opposed to like me, like I don't skydive or anything like that, but what I'll do is I'll throw out, some jokes online, and, be like, what's going to happen. I mean, there's very much a part of, I don't know if it's sort of like a Peter Pan complex, where you kind of feel like a kid in comedy. I do, at least, like it's like, oh, this is where I get to play. This is where I get to fuck around. This is where I get to, um, start fights.
yeah,
Not fist fights, but it's good to troll and stuff
absolutely.
like that. It's fun. Yeah.
So you actually, that's an interesting way to look at it. We have there's a guy in the LPNC who does a lot of our graphic design, and he's a tattoo artist. And he talks about how much he argues with like fellow tattoo artists. And it's the same attitude, like
Anyway.
very leftist, very collectivist, very like, and I understand the whole like, so also came up like full punk rock kid, keep warm, burn the rich, but it was never like an anti success position. It was like an anti using the government to exploit people position, which I think is something very, very different. There's what politicians do in my book.
Yeah, I grew up in uh Little Neck, which is near Long Island, and next door is a town called Douglaston. And there was like when I was in like middle school, there was a vibrant, Long Island punk ska scene.
Nice.
And there was a band, I forget what their name was, but they had like a song like I think the chorus is like, I hate the rich, just really to the point.
Was it like Crass, maybe?
I'm not sure. I'm not
Fair
sure.
enough.
But it's just like, I hate the rich, and blah blah. Um, and it's like, but you guys go to private school, and your parents own their houses in Douglaston. Like you're rich, definitely
Yeah.
compared to the rest of the world, you're rich. And then there was like a local McDonald's, and they used to like go there and like torment like the people who work there. And I think for one of their LPs or albums, or like there was like a cassette. They took like a picture of like the cashier, who I think her name was like Rosa. I think they had a song about like Rosa,
Okay.
and making
So
fun of
this is
Rosa.
really a super local band.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Super, super logo. And it was like, just having a song about, fucking with the people at McDonald's. And it's like, yeah, man, but you hate the rich in one in one song while you are rich, and you're fucking with the people who work at McDonald's, all of whom like English is their second language
They
because
need that. Yeah, they need the money. It's
yeah,
how
they need
elitist
money,
can you be?
and they have to deal with, these like, 13, 14-year-old punk rockers who just are just dicks. Um, so I think there's that. I think for a lot of people, they can't, they might have a tough time seeing past themselves and their own thoughts, where it's like, well, yeah, of course, people need to be fed, man. Yeah. And it's like, okay, well, have you tried to feed
Yeah,
people?
go feed someone.
Go feed someone. What goes into that? There's this douchebag on Twitter. There's this one douchebag on Twitter, but he's
Yeah,
like,
touche.
just like a, ultra commie, in his profile picture. He has like a fucking mask on and glasses, and he's just always just posting this, just, commie junk. And there was one, he posted a meme like, capitalism, uh, they make food not to feed people, but for
I
profit.
saw that going around.
And once they stop profiting, uh, we let people starve, something like that. And it was in response, like for one, you can deconstruct that, and I'm sure that there's a fucking hour long,
Of
video on YouTube,
course, at least.
of, deconstructing why that's so fucking stupid, right? But he used that in response to an article about, I think it was Wendy's considering
The
doing,
timing thing,
yeah, yeah, like what do they call it with Uber? It's like
peak
these,
hours.
yeah, peak hours where, at peak hours, the sandwiches are going to cost a little more, you know? And this guy is extrapolating what Wendy's is doing to capitalism will starve you if you can't make a profit. It's like, and it was, when you see that, it's just such a waste of time where it's like, hey, dude, do you grow food? Like, do you even know what it entails to
Yeah,
feed?
it's. I was gonna say I have 3 garden plots in my backyard. It just takes some seeds, water, and sunlight. Like it's really easy to grow tomatoes. It's
Uh-huh.
really easy to grow tomatoes. I did see that going around. The Arizona Libertarian Party has been all over stuff,
Oh yeah, cool.
and they were jumping on that. I was cracking up with it. Um, so I know you're not feeling great. I don't want to keep you super long. I appreciate you being on here. Just a few follow-up questions.
Yeah, sure.
Um, well, first of all, before we get into that, like anything you want to plug, anything people should be looking at other than your book, which again I cannot recommend enough to everyone listening.
Thank you. Yeah, if you go to thelouperez.com, like all my links and stuff are there. And I really like your shirt, Libertarians Who Make Art.
Thank you. Check them out. Twitter, the website, they're awesome. They do awesome stuff. I'm obsessed with this libertarians in the arts thing. So um well, so what's next for Lou Perez? What do you got going on for 2024?
I'm let's see. So I'm waiting. I'm in like, negotiation on like a number of projects that I'm, really fingers crossed,
Gotcha.
hoping come through. So some of them are comedy related, others are um, you know, producing interesting projects and stuff. So so there's that. I'm gonna be doing stand up, looking to record my first special
Oh,
this
nice.
year. So excited about that.
If you haven't made book tour stops, I'll just say Charlotte is an awesome comedy city that no one knows about.
I would
Hint,
love
hint.
I would love to come down. That'd be fantastic.
So, my last question for you, out of curiosity, on a personal note, who are your favorite stand-up comedians? Who are your influences, and like how have they influenced you?
Oh man. I hate this question. No. No,
I
it was
get it because you don't want to not mention someone and you don't want to put people on the spot, but
yeah. Yeah.
like I can stand here and say, like, Mitch Hedberg got me into comedy. If I didn't discover Mitch Hedberg, I don't know that I would have loved it the way I did. And from there, then I discovered Henny Youngman, and then it was like,
Oh wow, really? Wow.
yeah, and just the way he rapid fires those jokes, and then you start listening to Rodney Dangerfield, like I'm getting into the old stuff, and then Richard Pryor, and so then you fast forward, and it's like then I discovered David Tell, and
Yeah.
David Tell had he had maybe the funniest joke I've ever heard live because we were with we're not really friends anymore, but she was woke when it was like just becoming cool, and David Tell was like, so I was fucking this girl last night, doggy style. We didn't plan that. It's just how she passed out. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. And
Yeah.
this girl's jaw just dropped to the
Right.
floor. Why did you come to a comedy club then?
Yeah. She was the girl. She was the girl that
Yes.
uh, yeah, no, I think that pedigree of comedians that you talked about, that lineage of just really just incredible, just joke writers,
Yeah.
like Rodney Dangerfield. You watch his stuff on Carson, it still holds up
Oh,
like 60 years later. Like the stuff is just it's so perfect, just so perfectly written. And um it was funny earlier tonight I watched um a Mitch Hedberg bit. It wasn't necessarily a Mitch Hedberg bit, but Artie Lang was telling a story about Mitch Hedberg, how Mitch had given him like a joke because he was a fat guy, and like, and I don't want you guys could check it out.
okay.
Artie Lang tells Joe Rogan the Mitch Hedberg story.
Okay.
But when you look at like someone like yeah, like take someone like Mitch Hedberg, I mean, it's a tragic ending, to someone who's just so talented and such an interesting mind, but the comedy itself is just so I, how do you if you're not laughing out loud, you got to be smiling when you're watching the thing. It's just it's like it's all joy, really.
Yeah.
It's a really what a special comedian. And then as far as my old school guys, I guess, I've like George Carlin, love Carlin, and
Yeah.
Richard Pryor. And I got to do uh, a thing for FIRE, which is Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression.
Yes.
We in December of 2023, it was the 20th anniversary of the pardoning of Lenny Bruce, the posthumous pardoning of Lenny Bruce. So Lenny Bruce was like the last convicted comedian in the United States, convicted for obscenity, and he was eventually pardoned by Governor Pataki in New York. And so I got to do like a short video with one of the lawyers who worked on the case, Robert Corn Revere. And it was a fun, really happy with with the video, how it turned out. And I got to, go back and check out some Lenny Bruce stuff. And I've heard quite a few people, comment on like, Lenny Bruce, they understand like his historical significance, but his stuff isn't funny. If you look back, like it's dated, it doesn't really work. And I found it, it depends on the bits that you find, because I think there's some of the stuff that he was doing there. I'm like, oh shit, that does that still hits. It still,
Still holds up.
yeah, yeah. But I think, the setup punchline comics, like, I, I think they might, just sort of outlive everybody because it just works perfectly. It's like, I don't know, it's just like an equation, it's like perfect math.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Especially when it all comes together. That's what I mean. What Chappelle will always be the greatest set is the full story coming, the full circle story.
And yeah, and like with Chappelle, like, man, is there anybody more comfortable on stage than him, because like I watched his last special, which I wasn't that into it. I mean, I don't think it was as good as the closer that came before it, but he's one of those guys, like, I like watching him on stage, you know there are some actors who they're in movies and they don't necessarily need to be saying anything in a scene for me to enjoy their presence. And I think Chappelle is one of those guys too. Like, the prospect of going, see, I bet seeing him live is a really great experience. Seeing him
Oh,
live, just, watching him work for, an hour, or if he goes and pulls out one of those 4 hour
well,
things.
so
I
that's
don't,
I saw
I
him in
don't think it,
October, and it was the tour for the special, but he took like 35 minutes out of the special, and he went a good 2 hours for us.
wow.
And the whole thing about when he was attacked on stage, there was so much more to that. And the Will Smith tie-in, he took out the whole story about like accidentally doing too many mushrooms at um Floyd Mayweather's strip club and giving him a bag of $15,001 bills without realizing what he was doing. Like it was the Netflix special was good. I agree with you. There were his prior ones were better, but he took a whole bunch out of it. Um
Yeah, and that's something too, like what they do and what you experience live versus what makes it into the broadcast.
Chris Rock talks about that. He said the tough thing now is everybody's got a cell phone. You can't just go try material at a club.
Yeah.
And that was so I will leave you with this story. My very first comedy show was Mitch Hedberg at the DC Improv. I grew up in DC. Um, and he went long. We went to the late show. You could tell like he'd been drinking. Um, but he's killing it. Like my sides hurt, my cheeks hurt. I'm covering my ears because I can't laugh for jokes. And he goes for like 70 or 80 minutes. And then he's like, "Oh, I was gonna go a little bit longer, but we got something special for you." They're telling me I gotta leave. So everyone's like, "Oh," so the MC comes out and he's like, this Friday night show, he's like, "We got a real special surprise for you. An old friend of the DC Improv in town for the night wants to do like 15 minutes of comedy for you. Give it up for Chris Rock." And just there's Chris Rock wearing like a gray sweatsuit 20 feet away from me.
That's
Um,
wild.
it was awesome. So if there is one comedian that I highly recommend, if you haven't seen him, Casey Rocket, uh, up and coming, just he's got like a madman style. Like he paces the whole time. He was on Kill Tony, and he had a harmonica and a picture of something like, yeah, prop comic and a music comic. Like, what's up now? And it's just highly recommend.
Cool.
But that's the new one. For everyone else listening, I highly recommend Lou Perez, not just the book, all of it. You're a truly funny human being, and I really appreciate what you're doing. I really appreciate your position in the culture war because instead of stoking fires, which you're not afraid to do, but you are actually engaged in pushing back and sort of reclaiming freedom of speech, reclaiming sort of this not right, but the ability to say what we have without fear of reprisal just for saying it. This anti-wrong thing, I guess. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Rob. I really appreciate it. And thank you very much for the review of my book too.
Absolutely. Everyone, thelouperez.com, at the Lou Perez on Twitter, right?
Yep.
I've been all the handles are up, and I'm going to put them all up on the screen and in the comments. So thank you very much, North Carolina. Until next time, have a wonderful rest of your day.
Next is the award for citizen activism. This work recognizes someone who dedicates time in their private life to pursuing records and sharing information and public accountability with members of their community, with their neighbors. Recipients of this award demonstrate a deep and abiding commitment to public openness and accountability and democratic participation. This year's recipient is special. His life has not been simple. He doesn't do a lot of the things that we typically associate with public records awards. But his life has unquestionably been affected by a key provision in our public records law, and he is working to change it. Joshua Rohrer is a veteran. After serving in the armed forces in Iraq, Joshua came back and suffered from PTSD, became homeless. And in October 2021, he was arrested for the harmless, victimless crime of panhandling in Gastonia, North Carolina, asking for money. During that arrest, the police tased his PTSD service dog, and his service dog just so happens, that service dog happened to be named Sunshine, and Sunshine has since died. Since that time, though, Joshua has dedicated much of his time amassing support to change the police body camera law and criminal investigation provisions in the North Carolina Public Records Law, and to improve police accountability more broadly. He has become deeply engaged in policy debates over qualified immunity, and he has lived and breathed the importance of accountability in policing every single day since October 13, 2021. He has a website, sunshineprojectnc.com, and he will happily talk to you about his hopes to one day ensure that the access laws in this state better serve the governed over the interests of the governors. So I'm proud this year, again, to recognize Joshua Rohrer, winner of this year's Citizenship Sunshine Award.
I just want to thank everybody who thought that she's got something to say too. I want to thank everybody that thought that there was any merit to me standing here today and have heard my story and saw what I've gone through. I think she's just as nervous as I am. Out of every outcome that I could have ever imagined, I never imagined that I would be in this situation right here, receiving an award with my previous service dog's name on it, Sunshine. Her name was Sunshine Ray, and she was my pride and joy, and she was my life, and she was my service dog that made it possible for me to function, and that was taken away from me. I'd like to thank everybody that supported me through my fight, and that has made it possible for me to be in this position today. I've got my friends over here, my supporters, Thomas Hill, Dave Dowell, Joe Garcia, and Mike Ross, who is the current candidate for North Carolina governor. And they have been there since day one, since this happened to me, and boots on the ground, been at city council meetings, speaking on my behalf, and making it so that I have a voice. And a lot of people aren't that fortunate, and a lot of people don't have voice, and I certainly wouldn't have had a voice without all those supporters. And now they become my friends. So it's extremely humbling to receive this award, the Sunshine Award. Today's North Carolina body camera law should not be structured in a way where a homeless person has to come up with $40,000 to gain access to material to defend themselves in a court of law and a court of public opinion. As in my case and many other cases, law enforcement actively attempts to suppress publicly recorded video, creating a public fear of citizens being their own witnesses. Government-owned cameras are becoming the only way for the public to see the whole picture and maintain their ability to counterbalance the government's actions. Sadly, both major political parties are guilty of eroding our most basic rights when interacting with our government, creating a greater need for people like myself to be vigorously vocal about their interactions with police and other public officials. This is an issue that can impact a once homeless person like myself, and it can impact people of the stature that I see here today. I'm grateful for the light that is being shined on issues like this, and I hope to learn about some of the ways the North Carolina Open Government Coalition are doing that. With that in mind, something important to me is that we need more activists and leaders addressing body camera laws and all the other ways the General Assembly has closed down public information. This is going to have to be fixed at the grassroots. Raleigh will do nothing, DC will do nothing. So when the unfortunate opportunities open, we need lawyers and the scholars standing beside the victims and citizens fighting like this. We need the journalists to be brave and value the truth over future stories. As Edmund Burke said, all tyranny needs to gain a foothold is for people of good conscience to remain silent. Because while I have a voice, I could not have done it without my supporters. Many others are not as fortunate. So many are fighting this fight alone. I've had people from across this nation who don't know where to turn. These people need support from groups like this and their stories told. The goals of this summit can be accomplished. There's a magnitude of people who are ready to stand up and restore their rights, which have been infringed on. They just need a ray of sunshine to show them the way. Be that sunshine. Thank you.
Hey there, everyone. This week, unfortunately, it is Dub without Groo, but however, I am with our beloved chairman of the Libertarian Party of North Carolina, Mr. Ryan Brown. Mr. Ryan Brown, how are you, good sir?
I am doing well. I thought you were going to say, unfortunately, we're recording with Ryan this week, so.
No, it's not a bad week when you have to fill in as the old substitute co-host. You have good banter. And
Happy
of
to be
course,
here.
the
Thanks for
epic
having me.
beard. So, anyway, as we get into things, as we're recording, tomorrow will be March 11th, which will be the first day of legal sports gambling in North Carolina. And it is a day that North Carolina has desperately needed, has desperately wanted. And once again, I'm going to say it should have been sooner than this. As I've stated before, it was a failure of government to even start this program because you had a 6-month head start after the bill was signed in order to get this going. The gambling companies were willing participants and wanting to come into the state, and you had the empirical evidence that North Carolinians were flocking on I-85 and 95 up to Virginia and stopping at the Virginia rest stops to gamble due to geolocation. Because a lot of these gambling companies have foreseen the thought that people were going to use VPNs and lie about where they were. And so on a lot of these sites, you cannot go and say you're in another state when you're in your own state or whatever. And that's exactly what they were doing. In fact, I had a customer who came into the store one day, and she said she was living in Mebane, traveling all the way up to Danville, Virginia to shop for groceries. I said, "What are you doing here in Virginia?" She says, "Oh, I come up here to sports gamble." So I'm like, that was a good reason. And I think North Carolina saw the same thing happening with Virginia as what happened in 1989 when Virginia adopted the lottery and North Carolina didn't. You saw tons of North Carolinians just drive either north or south because South Carolina adopted it before North Carolina did too. And all the money that was lost, to those other states. But, as we both know, any revenue that is gained in this venture will be horribly, horribly mismanaged by the state of North Carolina.
Yes,
And it would have just
mismanaged at
been better
best.
off if, yes, a little bit of oversight, but it shouldn't have been overseen by the Lottery Commission.
Well,
They got
mismanaged at
their
best
hands
and
too much in
misapplied
the
at
cookie jar
worst.
as it is. Yeah. So anyway, that is the major story. And the second major story is it's about to be tournament time again for the beloved Atlantic Coast Conference. A lot was decided yesterday with the annual Duke Carolina game. And Carolina came out on top. And an interesting stat that came out after the game is that Duke in the two matchups against North Carolina had only led for 16 seconds in the two meetings combined. So that's a pretty steady stat to know that Carolina had Duke's number this year. And as I've told people, I think we're starting to see with NIL a reversal of the last 20 years where we had tons of one and done prospects to prospects staying in school 3 and 4 years again. And that's where you're getting some of these good ball clubs that have 2 and 3 seniors on their team, and they're going to be primed to make decent runs, coming up in the NCAAs.
So have they kept up a new stat for tripping, or is that not kept up?
Well,
on,
I don't know
basketball
because
stats?
Filipowski is now on every Carolina fan's hate radar because he obviously went to the Grayson Allen School of Tripping. That was very interesting. And Jay Billis is an analyst for ESPN, and Jay Billis is a Duke alumnus. And when even Jay Billis is suspicious of that, it's bad. So it'll be interesting to see how everyone does in the ACC tournament. And unfortunately, because State didn't have a very good year, they get to be in the play-in first round games, the 10-15 game. So, but Wake Forest just missed out on getting a double bye. They ended up, because of their loss to Georgia Tech, falling to the 5th seed and will have to play in the second round instead of the quarterfinal. The last spot went to Pittsburgh. So,
And these are for the
that's
ACC
how,
tournament?
Yeah, this is the ACC tournament. Yeah. So, but it'll be interesting because they're not going to switch off of 15 teams next year, even though there will be 18 teams in the conference. Only the top 15 will make the ACC tournament. So if you are one of the worst 3 teams, sorry, you're not invited. You don't even have a shot of making the NCAAs. Just stay home.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
That's how.
Pretty impressive. They have 15 out of 18 let in, but hey, got to make money somehow, right?
Yeah, because I don't know how they would do that with 18 teams. You would have to do like a preliminary round, then the first round, then that, because you'd have 4 games on that first round, and you'd have 1 extra game to play the 17 versus the 18, and that they would just get eliminated on the first day. So that's a bestial game pretty much right there. And then you have the 4 games. You don't really need, you seriously don't need 15 teams. I think they could have done a 16 out of 18 because you can make a decent bracket with 16 teams. But you just do it like the old NCAA, just do 1 16, 2 15, 3 14, etc. But that's how it's going to be next year. But let's just enjoy this year for what it is.
Yeah. Well said. So I'll admit I don't have a whole lot of knowledge on basketball. Not really my thing. But who do you think's going to come out with the ACC? What is it? The championship? Is that how they decided after the end of the tournament?
Yeah, that whoever wins the championship gets the automatic bid for the conference. Because even though they call it a regular championship, the ACC does not recognize it for anything, ever since the 1950s. That became part of the ACC Constitution, is that their tournament winner is the conference champion. Doesn't even matter if they finish the season in first or fifth or eighth or whatever. If you win the tournament, you are the ACC champion. And so that's how that works. Other conferences aren't like that, but the ACC is unique in that because they have always prided themselves, in the basketball realms. But, that's how it is. And some people may like it, some people may not. But
who's your bet on who wins it?
That's basketball for you. And now I'm going to go a little bit off into off-season football. This week will bring a lot of closures and unexpected cuts and cap casualties, as they say. And it is being reported that Bradley Bozeman is going to be one of those cap casualties once the calendar year of the NFL begins this week. They've already cut the tight end Hurst, and they franchise tagged Brian Burns. No word yet on whether Frankie Louvu will be tendered anything or whether they'll let him go seek other pastures. But I think it would be a mistake to let Louvu go because he has been a catalyst of that defense, especially when he's at linebacker. Because it is looking like it'll be Shaq Thompson's last year in football, especially after last year's devastating injury. He'll probably come back to give one more go and then turn it over to the new guys on defense. So that's basically what it looks like. I'm personally hoping to see what they do in the draft. Of course, they don't have a first-round pick. Their first pick will be the first pick of the second round, which is number 33. So we'll see if a receiver gets dropped into their lap or a good offensive lineman gets dropped into their lap from the good crop of those two position segments. And we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Some of those people you pick in the draft, you really never get a good read on. But some of them turn out to be stars. So, 33 is basically a first round pick. It's just the end of the first round, right?
Right, pretty much the first pick after the first round, exactly. And but the thing is, you don't have to pay a 33rd pick the same as paying a number 1 pick. So that's another big difference of picking that far down. So but in other football news, talking about the football with your feet or soccer, tonight the United States plays for the first ever Women's Gold Cup. They will play Brazil. And that match is scheduled to kick off tonight. I cannot remember the exact time. It's either 7:30 or 8 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time.
Let's see. It is going to be 7:15, I think. That's when coverage starts.
Oh, 7:15. Even more oddball.
Yeah.
But either way, they play tonight. And the USA will be looking to win the first women's Gold Cup. But Brazil will be looking to spoil the party. This is their first major tournament they have had without Marta, because she retired from all football, and that's probably the greatest women's soccer player Brazil has ever had. So she'll be put right up there with Pele.
Oh yeah.
And
I was gonna say I don't know much about Brazilian women's soccer, but I did know Marta was their player. She had been a staple for them for a very long time. So
yeah, this was the first tournament with a lot of veterans that weren't on the team anymore. Notably, Christine Sinclair had retired and she wasn't in for Canada, but Canada still had a strong squad. Marta on Brazil, Carly Lloyd, and Megan Rapinoe on the United States. Although the reason I believe they lost to Mexico in the group stage is due to a lot of inexperience that the United States did not have, because through the years they've paid lip service to these veterans and haven't, told them to be put out to pasture yet. We got to let some of these young guys play, and, they've pretty much acquiesced to these veterans, and it's come back to bite them. And, the women's game in the world is getting better. They're catching up to the United States. A lot of women come over to the United States to play their ball in our NCAA and then go back home to play for their country. That's how a lot of this has happened. And, we got to realize that, we're not going to be in it anymore. In the finals. Finals are not guaranteed anymore. We got to actually earn our way to the finals again. So, but that's that. And also going on the men's side, Charlotte FC lost a heartbreaker to Toronto, 1-0. And Insigne for Toronto scored a screamer that I don't think anybody was going to save. And Charlotte just could not find the back of the net, point blank range. But, they finally get another home game here coming up to right the ship. But in the first 3 games, they've got 4 points. And that was better than the first 3 games last year where they had a big old fat goose egg. So already this season is starting 3 points better than last year.
I was gonna say, I think the last time we were chatting was at the end of their last season, and they were pretty
Oh,
close
yeah.
to
Where
doing
they had barely
something.
made it into the playoffs on the
Yeah, I
last
think it was.
day.
I think
That
at that point we were talking, and that they had the chance to do it, but it was not guaranteed they were going to be in the playoffs. So
right, because and somebody else had to lose, and that's exactly what happened. And so there was much rejoicing, and then they got shellacked 3-0 in the play-in game. So hooray for
as it
that.
goes, yeah.
Anyway,
That's what I was
yeah.
going to ask. So
Anyway,
they are starting off better this year.
yeah, I think so. Dean Smith, the new head coach, has instilled a new type of, I don't know what it is, unity in the team. The team just seems they want to play for each other. And of course, maybe there's a little bit there going with the captain, Ashley Westwood, who's an Englishman, a little English going on there. And that could be what Charlotte actually needed, instead of what the previous 2 coaches were giving them, which was exotic, nonsensical stuff. They obviously had not coached in, major soccer before. And I think that was one of the things on the 3rd coach they were looking for, and that's why they got Dean Smith in there, because he had experience in the Premier League. So he knows how to coach, big boy soccer.
So you mentioned the Premier League. I was looking at my Facebook memories earlier today, and apparently 2 years ago on this day, the UK government froze Roman Abramovich's assets and basically stole Chelsea from him. And that was about 2 years ago today. So there you go.
Oh yeah,
due to this might be the
Russian
sports
sanctions.
section. Yeah, but I gotta throw some politics into the sports section. Talk about a team
Yeah,
losing
those were the
or
Russian
gaining.
sanctions.
Yep. You're talking about how Charlotte is gaining some sense of unity,
Yeah.
maybe, and Chelsea lost their identity about 2 years ago. So, hey, you never know what can happen.
Yeah, but I'm just, hey, I don't have a dog in the fight, but I have a few friends that are Arsenal supporters, and I'm happy for them. They're right now head of the Premier League, and their league is where they only give out one trophy. They don't have a playoff. It's just whoever's the winner at the end of the season, the 36 games, you get the trophy. So
But
that is
let's
very,
be
very,
honest here.
very old school.
They're 2 points ahead of Liverpool and 2 points ahead of Man City, and it's Arsenal, so they'll end up in third. Anyways.
But anyway, back to the American side of the house. We'll go over to hockey, and right now, as of yesterday, or as of today, I should say, yesterday the Hurricanes had a great 4-2 win up in New Jersey, and then they play again today at 5:00, and they're trying to gear up for a playoff run, trading for both Jake Gensel and Kuznetsov from Washington. I never thought in a million years that would happen. But
it didn't give up much to get him either.
Don Waddell is putting all his chips in there and shoving them to the table and trying to, make a run one last time and hopefully pass the Eastern Conference Final.
Are we 0-12 or 0-8 in our last couple games? I can't remember. But yeah, that's been a hurdle. So
yeah, they haven't won an Eastern Conference Final game since
I think
they haven't won an Eastern Conference Final game period since 2006. Because when they went in 2009, they got swept by Pittsburgh. So they're 0-4, 0-4, and 0-4.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh, and then Boston, and then Florida last year.
Yep. We got to get over this bump. I think
but
if we get
it's still nice to
hump,
have a team that's right, but it's still nice to have a team that's competing for that type of thing rather than a team in the doldrums, like in that doldrum area where they're not good enough for the playoffs, but not bad enough to get a decent lottery pick. That is like the worst place to be, and I'm also a Charlotte Hornets fan, so I know how that feeling is doubly. So that's why it was such a wonderment last year when they won the number 2 pick. I was just so happy to win the number 2 pick coming up from 9th that it's like, yes, maybe we can find 2 stars to build around, and that's what it looks like. That's what they're going to do. They're going to build around Ball and Miller and create a team around that. And I can already see them playing better. And if they had done some of these trades like in October or just before the season, I wouldn't have been mad. But I think part of it is it's the new regime that took over from Michael Jordan, finally getting their hands on the team and doing what they want to. And I think they were sort of hamstrung because control of the team didn't turn over, I think, officially until November something. So the last good thing Michael Jordan did was pick Brandon Miller because that was under his watch. So, but we'll see. Like I say, when it's this point, I'm just looking for Charlotte to improve and be spoilers to other teams' playoff hopes. And, look forward to next year when hopefully they will be much, much better.
Yep. It's hard when you're stuck at that, almost good enough point because you don't ever feel like you need to change management because you're always just a couple, wins away. And then you never actually get any better because you still got the same guys there in the first place. So, who knows?
Right. Yeah, but it's becoming a great time of year. Like I say, the conference tournaments and the NCAA tournaments are coming up, and it's going to be a fun time, and I'm just looking forward to it all. And it was a pretty good assessment today. Thank you again, Ron, for coming on and being my foil. I'm just so glad we have such a group here at Liberty Inc. that wants to help out fellow podcasters and segments and fill in from time to time, because, we couldn't do it without you guys. And also, I want to thank our audience for staying around in these podcasts and watching till the end, because we couldn't do it without you guys either. And, do the typical YouTube things, like, share, and subscribe. And
Yes, sir.
that's all I can say. And, like I say, Groo, we'll be rooting for you to get home safe. He's actually off on a little journey, and he'll be home. He's hopefully will be home tomorrow, but we wish him good as well. And again, Ryan, thank you for coming on this afternoon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And I make a good foil, but only because you make such a good host that I wouldn't want to try and emulate what you do. So you're the guy with all the
Thank you, Ryan.
knowledge.
That
I'm
means
just
a
the guy with
lot.
the snide remarks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, they're great, and I really appreciate it. And to all out there, we thank you again. And thank you for watching Dub and Groo this week without Groo. Y'all have a good one.